On November 24, 1974, a paleoanthropologist named Donald Johanson knelt in the dust of the Afar region of Ethiopia. He had just found a piece of bone. It was an elbow, nothing more. But something told him to keep digging. Over the next 3 weeks, his team pulled 47 bone fragments out of the ground. Together, they formed nearly 40% of a single skeleton. It was 3.2 million years old. That night, the team celebrated at their camp. A song called "Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds" was playing on a tape recorder. Someone joked that the skeleton should be named Lucy. The name stuck, but Lucy wasn't just old. She was impossible. Her brain was tiny, barely 400 cubic centimeters. That's about the size of a modern chimpanzee's brain. For decades, scientists believed intelligence came first. They believed big brains were the spark that made our ancestors stand up and walk. Lucy proved them wrong, because Lucy's hip bone was curved, her knee joint angled inward, her big toe lined up with the rest of her foot, instead of splaying out to the side like an ape. Every one of those features belongs to something that walks upright, on 2 legs, full time. A brain the size of a chimpanzee's. A body built to walk like a human's. How does that happen? Here's the strange part. Walking upright doesn't just look different. It rewires the entire skeleton. The human pelvis is short and bowl-shaped, built to hold organs in against gravity. A chimpanzee's pelvis is long and flat, built for 4-legged movement. Somewhere around 4 million years ago, in the species we now call Australopithecus afarensis, that entire structure changed, and it changed before the brain grew by even a single cubic centimeter. So why walk at all? For decades, the leading theory pointed to climate. Around 10 million years ago, forests across East Africa began to shrink. Grasslands spread in their place. Scientists assumed our ancestors stood up to see over tall grass, or to travel long distances between shrinking patches of trees. It made sense. It was also, it turns out, only part of the story. In 1981, an anthropologist named C. Owen Lovejoy proposed something different. He argued walking freed the hands. Freed hands could carry food. Carrying food meant a male could bring meals back to a mate and offspring. Walking, in his theory, wasn't only about surviving the savannah, it was about family. Not everyone agreed. In 2000, a French-led team working in Kenya found something that pushed the timeline back even further. A fossil called Aurorantuganensis, dated to roughly 6 million years old. Its thigh bone showed signs of upright walking too. If that dating holds, bipedalism may have started almost as soon as the human and chimpanzee lineages split apart, which raises a stranger question. What if walking wasn't a late adaptation at all? What if it was already there, buried in an ancestor we haven't even found yet? In 1994, in the same Afar region where Lucy was discovered, a team led by paleoanthropologist Tim White uncovered something older still. Ardipithecus ramidus, 4.4 million years old. Its pelvis showed early signs of upright walking, even though its feet still had a grasping big toe built for climbing trees. It was neither fully ground-dwelling nor fully arboreal. It was caught in between 2 worlds. In 2015, at a site called Latoli in Tanzania, scientists uncovered something even more extraordinary. Footprints, preserved in volcanic ash for 3.66 million years. 2 individuals walking side by side, their stride length, their heel strike, their weight distribution nearly identical to a human walking on a beach today. Whoever left those prints wasn't shuffling. They weren't knuckle dragging. They were walking exactly the way you walked to your kitchen this morning. Think about that. Nearly 3.7 million years before smartphones, before agriculture, before fire was fully controlled, before language as we understand it. Something was already walking like us. Why does any of this matter? Because for over a century, the story we told ourselves was backwards. We assumed the brain came first, and the body followed. Genius first, ability second. Lucy flipped that order. She showed the body changed first, by millions of years, and the brain caught up later. Between 3 million and 2 million years ago, brain size in our ancestors barely moved. Then, starting around 2 million years ago, it began to climb, eventually tripling in size by the time modern Homo sapiens appeared roughly 300,000 years ago. So what freed the brain to grow? One theory points straight back to the legs. Walking upright is remarkably efficient. A 2007 study led by biologist Herman Pontzer found that human walking uses about 75% less energy than the way chimpanzees move on the ground. Less energy spent moving means more energy available elsewhere. Elsewhere, in this case, meant a brain that consumes roughly 20% of your body's total energy today, despite being only 2% of your body weight. Walking may have quietly paid the metabolic bill for thinking. There's another theory, proposed by biologist Peter Wheeler in 1991. Standing upright exposes far less skin to direct overhead sun than moving on all fours. Less solar exposure means less risk of overheating. A cooler body, Wheeler argued, could support a brain that runs hot and burns enormous fuel. Walking wasn't just about moving, it may have been about survival in a furnace. Walking changed something else too. It changed birth itself. A pelvis built for upright walking is narrower than one built for four-legged movement. Narrower hips meet a growing skull, and something has to give. Human babies are born earlier, relative to brain development, than almost any other primate alive. A chimpanzee infant is born with a brain already at 40% of its adult size. A human infant is born with a brain at just 25% of its adult size. The rest of the growing happens outside the womb, in the arms of someone else. That means every single human who has ever lived was born too early, because an ancestor millions of years earlier decided to stand up. Lucy stood about 3.5 feet tall. She weighed around 60 pounds. Her bones show she likely died from a fall, possibly out of a tree, according to a 2016 analysis of fracture patterns by paleoanthropologist John Kappelman. She fractured her shoulder, her ankle, and her knee, all consistent with a single traumatic fall. A creature built to walk the ground may have still spent her nights sleeping in branches, safe from predators below. Isn't that strange? The creature that started the walk toward everything you are today may have died falling out of a tree. Since 1974, more than 300 fossil fragments of Australopithecus afarensis have been found across East Africa, painting a fuller picture of a species that survived for nearly 1 million years. That's 4 times longer than Homo sapiens has existed so far. They weren't a brief evolutionary experiment. They were a stable, successful body plan that worked for hundreds of thousands of years before anything resembling a modern human ever appeared. Lucy wasn't the first clue either. In 1924, 50 years before Johanson's discovery, an anatomist named Raymond Dart examined a small skull sent to him from a quarry in South Africa. He called it the Tong Child. Its brain was small, ape-like, but the hole at the base of its skull, where the spine connects, sat almost directly underneath the head. In an animal that walks on all fours, that hole sits toward the back. In something that walks upright, it sits underneath, balancing the skull like a ball on a post. Dart's claim that this was a human ancestor was mocked for decades. Most scientists at the time wanted a big-brained ancestor, something dignified. Dart was largely ignored until Lucy arrived and proved him right. Isn't it strange how long the truth can sit there, unwanted, waiting for someone to believe it? Modern researchers haven't stopped digging into Lucy's bones. In 2016, a team led by Christopher Ruff used high-resolution CT scans to examine the internal structure of her skeleton for the first time. They found her bones were dense and strong, closer in some ways to a modern human's than anyone expected. Evidence of a body that walked, and walked often, across real distances. She wasn't an occasional, awkward biped. Walking was simply how she lived. Other species tried standing upright too, in their own way. Kangaroos hop on 2 legs. Birds walk on 2 legs. Even some lizards can run briefly on their hind limbs to escape predators. But none of them became habitual, full-time, ground-covering walkers the way the Australopithecus line did. Somewhere in East Africa, one lineage of ape committed to it completely and never looked back. Why did that one commitment matter so much? Because everything downstream of it depended on it. Tool use depended on hands that were free because they weren't needed for walking. Long-distance persistence hunting, chasing prey across open plains for hours until it collapsed from heat, depended on an upright body that radiates heat far more efficiently than a 4-legged one. Even language may owe something to walking, since a wider ribcage and better breath control, both shaped by upright posture, appear linked to the fine motor control of speech. Stand up right now, if you can. Notice how little effort it takes. That effortlessness is not an accident. It's the end result of millions of years of skeletal renovation, all of it happening long before anyone alive today, or anyone who ever lived, could have known where it was going. In Ethiopia, Lucy is not only known by her nickname. Locally, she's called Dinkinesh, which translates roughly to "You are marvelous." For years, her actual bones toured museums across the world, drawing millions of visitors who stood in front of a skeleton barely 3.5 feet tall and felt, for a moment, like they were looking at a mirror pointed backward through time. In 2013, Ethiopia brought her home permanently, housing the original bones in a vault in Addis Ababa, with a replica now on display for the public. Why would a country protect a pile of 3.2 million-year-old bones so carefully? Because Lucy isn't just a fossil. She's evidence for something almost every human alive shares in common. Genetic studies consistently trace every living person's ancestry back to East Africa, which means, in some real sense, Lucy's descendants eventually walked out across every continent on Earth. Every argument about race, nationality, or origin runs backward through the same narrow point, a small band of upright walkers in the Afar region, moving across a changing landscape one careful step at a time. There's a quieter detail buried in all of this. Lucy's discovery didn't just rewrite a timeline. It rewrote an assumption baked into how humans saw themselves. We liked believing thought came first, that we stood up because we were already special. Lucy suggests the opposite. We became special because we were already standing. So the next time you walk to get a glass of water, or across a parking lot, or up a flight of stairs, you're not just moving. You're repeating a decision made by a small-brained, 3.5-foot-tall creature in East Africa, more than 3 million years before anyone had a reason to write it down. We didn't start walking because we got smart. We got smart because, long before that, something decided to walk.